So DCD was founded in the late 90s by George Rocket, who has said that he started it as a publication focused on the plumbing of the internet. You joined in 2018 as CMO.
Yes.
Got promoted to COO a couple years later. Got promoted to CEO a couple years after that. Prior to that, your career, you kind of spent a lot of time at a lot of different places. You were at The Telegraph. You were at Biomarket Insights. You founded a company that you sold, I believe, to Easy Fares. I think there was something else in between there.
Yeah.
What was it about data center dynamics and data centers that kind of made you want to stick around for, I think it's been 8 years now?
Yeah. I was very lucky when I joined DCD. George had spent the best part of 20 years, as you just alluded to, really building huge brand equity and brand trust. And as you said, it started life as a publisher. So he was able to build what we'd now call first-party data, but at the time would have been a subscription list, and did that very successfully to be the sort of resource point for digital infrastructure. And as media operators often do, he started getting invited to events, either as moderator or as a media partner. And I think at the time felt actually the content that we covered in the publication wasn't necessarily being reflected on the show hall or the conference theatre. And George, being the entrepreneurial person he is, said, well, actually, we should do our own events. We can do maybe a little bit better than this. And did so very successfully over the best part of that time. I think at one point he was running over 100 conferences a year. And in doing so, whether by design or by happy accident, built up a huge amount of data, huge amount of proprietary insight, an enormously credible network and community. And so by the time I joined in 2018, I was very lucky to and as you said, in a sort of CMO style role at the time, have George's enormous network and brand equity at my disposal, and B, have the industry's best data, which today looks like 400,000 opt-in records. And so I was very early on in 2018 able to see the business through a data lens, through a platform lens, and really focus on instrumenting and diversifying and scaling those platforms, which in any of those C-level positions is a tremendously lucky position to be in, because one of the biggest constraints for any media operator right now is data and insight, particularly in an AI age. So I was very fortunate to be able to inherit that. So that was firstly very attractive. And secondly, the underlying industry is unbelievable. It's unbelievably strong. You've got huge 100 million plus billion, in some cases, CapEx projects. You've got an enormously fast rate of technology refresh. You've got a huge people constraint. They need upskilling, they need recruiting. All of these facets make for an incredible opportunity for a B2B media operator in terms of the resilience of marketing spend, the necessity and imperativeness of deal making in face-to-face contexts, and also the learning and development of core people in the industry. It's a mission-critical industry. I think 80% or so of the outages are still human error. So L&D in developing talent is absolutely at the heart of what operators across the industry need to do. And through DCD Academy and our workforce development platform, we're able to help support the community in that way as well. So enormously attractive underlying industry, enormously attractive data platform. It's been a frenetic 8 years.
Yeah. What did the business look like when you first joined versus what it looks like today? It's been, I guess, 8 years. Like what has been that transformation over the past 8 years?
I think really trying to think about it through a platform lens, almost a SaaS-like lens. So it sounds funny to say because DCD started life as a publisher, but when I started in 2018, it was structured very much like a typical events business maybe. It had lots of regional MDs, so it was a regional structure, which works really well when you're running lots of regional events and you need to scale local teams. I didn't necessarily see that as the best way to run a platform business. And so we started to put the jigsaw pieces in place to distribute like a creator, which George did very successfully, I'm using maybe a slightly more updated term for it, borrowing from a B2C context. But the content distribution was always top class. But we really needed to start thinking about instrumenting like a platform. And so start building around essentially the three engines that power the business today. The first one being our sales enablement platform, which really is there to help sales, BD and marketing professionals go to market more effectively, influence pipeline, and ultimately close deals. So our media engine, our marketing as a service line, and our events engine all feed into an integrated sales enablement platform. The way that we go to market is fully integrated across media and events. So we don't have separate sales teams. We've always found that to be counterproductive because I think when you have media and event operators in a silo, A, structurally internally, you can start competing with each other if you're not careful. B, it's not very customer-centric. And I think for me, media businesses actually historically have been inherently bad about thinking about the customer. And what we really tried to do was put the customer at the heart of our business. And so integrating the media side and the event side into the sales enablement platform was really key. Our go-to-market teams go to market selling outcomes, not product. So each campaign, we will underwrite a certain amount of reach, a certain amount of engagement and thought leadership, a certain amount of MQLs. This is all underwritten. There's an SLA in every single contract. So whether that's a sort of lighthouse moment at a face-to-face event and we're underwriting a number of meetings or a number of buyers in your lunch or whatever that curated, deliberate interaction may be, or whether that's a media campaign, we are selling outcomes. And we're really acting as an extension of our partners' marketing teams. The sales enablement platform itself reports in real time the attribution of that campaign. I mean, this was the age of attribution at the time, right? You talk about 2018. Well, what was going on then? You had Salesforce and HubSpot promising last touch attribution, probably incorrectly, but nevertheless, that was the media obsession at the time, right? And you had a huge avalanche of social platforms offering cost per click or cost per impression or whatever it may have been. And so to some degree, B2B media was pretty slow to respond to that, I think, overall. Yep. And we really wanted to differentiate there. So it started as a real-time, best-in-class reporting platform. And then as we scaled and the coverage grew and our website's currently trafficking to about 26 million visits a year, which is pretty scaled in B2B terms.
It helps to be in data centers. I mean, it's
it's
a hot topic.
The tailwinds are unbelievable. The tailwinds are unbelievable.
I mean, I worked in crypto when some of the bubbles were happening, so
but it means we're also now capturing sort of 3 million transactions or behavioral trend data points a month. And so what started as a best-in-class reporting platform actually became an insights platform, a trend platform, and increasingly down to the individual level, we're looking at intent data. Again, a bit of a loaded term that we can dive into later, say purchase propensity if you prefer. So we're able to give our clients a view of that in real time so they can stay a step ahead of their competitors. And in an AI age, if you're not on that day one shortlist, I think you may be 96% less likely to win the RFP, right? And so giving access to that intelligence really helps them go to market more effectively. And that platform has had 38,000 logins in the past 12 months. So it's deeply habituated. It's become a habit-forming product. And it's part of their daily workflows now. I think it's part of what makes our media and event propositions so sticky. We're seeing NRR in excess of 100%, which puts you in a really strong position for growth. So that was really core aim number one that we began in 2018. Now, similarly, we've got an L&D business. And in 2018, that was mostly targeted towards individuals as a means of career development or career acceleration. We offered credentials that would strengthen their CV and they'd go on and accelerate in their careers, perhaps more quickly than they would have otherwise had. And that worked for a while, but as the industry scaled, you've just alluded to the enormous tailwinds, staff development became a key industry pain point. I mentioned the stat on outages earlier. For every minute that your data center goes down, You're talking about millions and millions of cost for your tenants. In fact, in the UK, it's recently been officially classified as critical national infrastructure. And so when you're in a mission critical industry, upskilling of your staff is key. And we saw an opportunity there. The operators need visibility, need attribution across two things: knowledge. So what's your knowledge score in your teams and how are you mitigating that gap? But also confidence. It's a mission critical environment. So it's one thing understanding the theory, but these engineers, whether they're mechanical or electrical side, have to understand how to implement it under pressure. So our workforce development platform, again, tracks that in real time to try and work with L&D teams to not just badge or certify, but actually give them structured L&D plans over a longer period. So we've got multi-year deals in play right now with the likes of Digital Realty, one of the big operators. And the really nice part of that is you also have this sort of compounding flywheel effect. So we're training engineers from these king buyers, don't like the term, but from the industry's leading operators through our workforce development platform. And then we're helping their procurement through our sales enablement platform by connecting them with the industry's leading vendors. So you've got this enormously beneficial sort of compounding flywheel effect. And thirdly, what that's enabled us to do as we've scaled, we've got all the proprietary insight from the trend and behavioural data coming off our platform, whether that's who attended certain sessions at events, who attended lunches, or even who's downloaded X white paper, Y ebook, whatever that trend may be. We've also got trend data from our workforce development platform. So this enables us, and we're about to launch actually in Q4, our market intelligence platform, using all of this proprietary data, but also contributory data from our vendors, which comes back to the brand equity piece that we started with. So we've got 10 founding partners now, all contributing data sets. We've got our 3 million behavioural transactions a month, and we've got data from the 8,000 engineers we train every single month. At a seminal time for the industry, as we're seeing greater energy constraints, huge compute growth, it really is from chip to grid now, the market that we're serving. We've got the industry's most reliable and robust forecast. So we're super excited about that third platform and the extra insight it's going to provide to our readers.
So we're going to dig into all those aspects of the business, which is fun. But one of the things you and I were talking about right before we came on was George started the company and he ran the company for a very long time and he's still involved in the business, but you're the first CEO post-founder, which I think is kind of an interesting role to play, especially when the founder's still involved. Like I think about AMO, obviously, where I don't even call myself a CEO. But someday, when this business is 25, 30 years old, someone else will be running the operation. I think it's an interesting transition to go from founder-led to CEO-led. Talk a little bit about what it's like taking over for the original founder, what that transition is like, where is there tension and opportunity? Because it's an interesting kind of transition that takes place.
Yeah, and look, I have to give George huge credit there because as a founder, he's invested 25 years plus of his life into this brand. So it's a huge amount of trust to let someone go on and manage it and scale it. So all the credit needs to go to him, really, for making my life much easier in that regard. I think it's also being cognizant of each other's strengths and weaknesses. I will never have the industry connections and the depth of industry understanding that George has. Very few people globally will ever have that.
Right.
Because he's been there since, I think you referenced it in your intro brilliantly, since the beginning of the internet age. He'll walk into a data center conference anywhere in the world and people will know who he is. So we have to, in the best possible way for the business, exploit that and utilize that and put George into those positions where he can add value and use his gravitas to help us scale. And also he's brilliant on brand, as most publishers are. So DCD started as a print magazine. His brand eye, his visual aesthetic eye is far, far stronger than mine. And he'll often beat me up for that. You forget about it sometimes. The aesthetic remains important, particularly in an AI age. How are you investing in your brand? How are you visualizing? How is it a reflection of who you want to be as a business? And he's exceptional there. And much to his chagrin, I'm not. But But where I am very strong and can actually help elevate that further is on the platform and data side. We are customer obsessed, and we really think about quality of earnings. Because if you are giving yourself a base as a media operator where you've got volume retention in the hundreds and you've got NRR in the hundreds, you're putting yourself in a really great, tailwinds or not, you're putting yourself in a really great position for growth. So I think it's about being really clear about the strengths and weaknesses and having those difficult conversations up front and understanding where each of us adds value. He's a much better launcher of events than I am. He's done some exceptional work working with Rebecca Salzner in the US, who was previously at Shop Talk and has a sort of big show mentality that sometimes you miss here in London. The US teams really know how to do that well. And Yotta from organic launch in 2024 is going to be 7,000 people this year, 10 million plus revenue event. Well, that's some scale, and George has been really driving that, again, with his gravitas, with his connections, and brilliantly looked after by Rebecca and the Yotta team. So I'll give them a shout out. So it's about playing to those strengths and understanding that Venn diagram and actually letting each other get on with what we're each respectively strong at.
I know, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess it was about 4 years ago now that Opus came in.
That's right, yeah, 2022.
Yeah, and so Opus comes in, they buy the brand, right? So George has got a great exit. It's around the same time you step in as CEO, maybe a couple months there. What was their overall thesis around buying DCD, and what have they empowered you all to do to grow?
Yeah, great question. So Opus operates like a family PE, essentially. What's been really great about having their support is they're individuals who understand media probably better than anyone. So the main man behind it, Stephen Brooks, he was previously at Matt Brooks Exhibitions, obviously exited that for hundreds of millions in 2019. Timed it well just before the pandemic.
Great outcome.
And so understands events better than most, which is really all you can ask for an investor. The chairman is Simon Kimball, who's been brilliant with me, as you alluded to, a new, relatively inexperienced CEO. Couldn't have asked for more from Simon. He'd obviously been in the seat at Clarion for some time. I think steered Clarion through four or five very successful exits, obviously most latterly to Blackstone. So the operating team there behind Opus Origin is vastly experienced. Even on the information services side, they brought in Dan Davey, who was previously at Global Data, Sam Jennings on the M&A, who again was previously at Clarion. So they're treating it like a PE vehicle, but they've almost become a really, for me, brilliant operating partner. They understand the difficulties of scaling a business. They've been hugely supportive in M&A. So not only have they invested in organic launches like Yotta that George was spearheading, but they've also helped us with M&A. We acquired a great data center brand called Data Center Nation, who do best-in-class events in sovereign digital infrastructure markets, including a big event in Milan in just a couple of weeks. And that was, I think, 3 million of revenue at point of acquisition. It's going to be 7 or 8 this year. Wow. So again, we've had huge organic growth even on top of the M&A.
We're talking pounds, right? 3 to 7 million.
Yeah,
okay. Just for the US
GBP,
audience.
sorry,
yeah.
And SDxCentral, which was a US media brand that we believe we could scale with our platform model. And we've brought in some editors. It's got 4 or 5 full-time editors now, which again, in an AI age, human content, trust, how do you productize that engagement? And it's going on and doing great things and enabled us to launch other events as well, like accelerated compute. So it really gives us a compute brand vehicle. So they've been very supportive in M&A, hugely supportive in increasing headcount. I think we've gone from 100 to 200 staff.
Wow.
And we're at about 55 million in revenue. So yeah, they've been fantastic as partners for George and for myself.
So how involved are they in your day-to-day? Like, is it like an operating committee? Like, are they decision-making rests at their level, your level? Like, how does that kind of work?
No, they'll be hands-off in terms of day-to-day operations. They're trying to keep it as much like a PE vehicle as possible. But they're always there when needed, So I've leaned on Simon for general mentorship and advice. Dan Davies been brilliant with the new information services line. So they're there as required, but they'll obviously respect the management team, the MDs, the CEOs are vastly experienced. I'm very lucky there. Our COO is Rhiannon Collinson, who was, I think, employee number 6 at Tech Oracle, and also spent some time at the Telegraph. Our chief revenue officer has been at Terrapin and IQPC. We've got an experienced management team who are doing a great job looking after the day-to-day of the business.
So let's talk about, you kind of broke this down into 3 platforms, right? You talked about like the media and events side of things. You talked about the learning and development, and then you talked about this intelligence thing, which I do want to spend some time there because it's a new thing that's coming. But let's start with the media and events. You know, when you're talking about selling that portfolio or that platform, you talked about you don't have separate sales teams. You have one event. You don't have events and media selling separately. When a sponsor or partner kind of comes to you to talk to you, how is the sales team guiding them towards what makes the most sense for what they're trying to do versus, you know, a lot of times even when, you know, I've got outreach to us, it's like we want X, we want Y, or we're the demand gen person or we're the events person. How do you break that down from a sales perspective to make sure you are really leading with the outcomes rather than the products?
To educate and challenge, let's take your example. A customer comes in and has a demand generation pain point. They need X amount of leads by X date. So first of all, it's understanding why that's the case. Like, okay, you know what's driving that. What's the type of lead? What sort of company type? To think about then. Well, actually, okay, let's say they want to target data center operators investing in cooling technology. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're very lucky again to have the first-party data set that supports that level of targeting. And let's say they need, 750 MQLs in a 3-month window. Okay, great. So we need to then go into our data set and look at what those individuals procuring cooling tech at data centers are looking at. What are they consuming? What does their buyer journey look like? It all comes back to buyer journey, right? So what are they doing when they're in market researching? What does that typical behavior look like? Are they consuming white papers? Are they downloading our editorial analysis? Are they watching more broadcasts when they're in purchase mode? And then taking that data to then recommend the campaign. And it's about giving the technology provider or the client, in this case our customer, confidence that we understand those buyer behaviors in our customer's customer. And we can craft the campaign. And look, we may not always get it right. I may recommend to you, okay, you want cooling in data centers? Let's do a broadcast. We've got a cooling channel. Our broadcast team and the cooling channel will put something together for you, a little bit like we are today, talking here. We'll put that out, we'll gate it, we'll drive the leads. Maybe it doesn't quite get the persona that they were looking for. Okay, no problem. We're going to take that investment and we're going to spin that into a supplement or an ebook. So it really is about the outcome, not the product. Mm-hmm. The product is the on-ramp for us. Product's the on-ramp, but we're fairly agnostic there. The key is getting them into the platform, habituating that into their marketing workflow in this case, and making sure that they're getting the real-time information they need to ultimately, it's one thing to have the leads for the demand gen. It's another thing to then have the conversation with them. Right, how many of those have gone into your pipeline?
Right.
What's the pipeline influence and ultimately what's the revenue outcome? Now that requires maybe a slightly longer term relationship because deal cycles can be 12 to 18 months. But again, if you're not having that level of conversation, you're doing your clients a disservice.
And so you talked about this idea of having an SLA, right? Where the client, you guarantee to the client something, the outcome will happen. So you do, let's say this is an example of a piece of content that would go up in your, on one of your sites. So we do this interview, right? We're going to gate this interview. That's going to drive their targeted leads, but you missed the mark,
yep.
Right? Maybe you deliver 60%. So now you got to go and get another 40% of those leads.
Yep.
But you charge them for, you've got a cost structure associated with doing this type of work versus incremental work. How do you balance the unknown around that sort of, it's an unpredictability towards hitting target versus selling by product, which is a little bit more this product is $5,000, this product is $15,000. You're buying those two products, it's $20,000 versus the unknown of an outcomes-based thing. How do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, great question. Now, that's more difficult when you're embryonic and you're testing things out for the first time and you're learning and you're iterating and you're learning and you're iterating. And look, to some degree, that's always the case as media formats change. A few years ago, you and I may well have done this as a telephone interview that you'd write up, right? So you have to be ahead of those trends. But ultimately, we back ourselves to understand the market, to understand the way that we go to market. And very rarely do we have a scenario whereby we're underwriting something that doesn't happen. If it happens, there's additional incremental cost. But actually, you know what? We are best in class for a reason. Whether we're scaling content through independent output or ultimately sponsored vehicles, as in your example, the market still needs that knowledge. Mm-hmm. So whether one of our broadcast team are having a sponsored conversation or one of our editorial team are writing up a sponsored piece or an independent piece, that's content. We have to operate at a cadence whereby we're putting content out in the market anyway, aggressively. I think we did something like 400 broadcasts last year, video broadcasts like this. And so if you've got to do an extra one extra two for a sponsor, we're operating at a scale where actually it doesn't derail margin or anything like that. It's just another one of the 400. And again, look, I know I'm speaking from a fortunate place. We've been working at this a long time. We've got 15 to 20 FTE editors. We've got a broadcast team, separate team, who just do the video content. That's about 7 or 8 strong. So I sit here being able to underwrite SLAs, right, obviously from a very fortunate position of being well invested in terms of content and people. It's people that make it happen. So ultimately, if we get one or two wrong, I've got a broadcaster right there who can do another interview this afternoon. We've got a recording studio a little bit like this in our office. So my risk's well mitigated, and I appreciate that I'm fortunate to be in that position. But also, when you've been publishing for so long, you talked about business is 25 years old, you really start to understand the go-to-market dynamics of the industry that you're serving. And so it's very rare that we have a scenario whereby we've got a campaign wrong. Maybe that's another interesting point, is the specialism. If we're operating in 15 to 20 different verticals, I think there's that much more risk in working in the way that we do. The way that a retail market behaves might not necessarily be the way that a financial market behaves, might not necessarily be the way that a agriculture market behaves. And so you'll see a greater level of variance in those buyer journeys. Oh, the video just didn't work in agriculture. That's weird. It worked really well in retail. There's more risk there. Our depth of specialism in this industry is, again, a key differentiator that actually we probably don't talk about enough, to be honest.
You did a podcast a couple of years ago where you talked about hitting 100% client retention. And DC,
you've done your homework.
Yeah, no, listen. And it's ironic. I use, when I do these interviews, the first thing I do is I say to Claude, this is who I'm interviewing. Go find everything I need to find about this person. And it pulls out all this information I never would have found. I never would have found this episode if I didn't do this. And it took 2 minutes. And then I obviously redo all the interview stuff because, you don't want AI to ask the questions because you get really weird questions. But so you did this podcast a couple of years ago where you talked about hitting 100% client retention on DCD's digital products. And one of the things that you said was you credited that to behavioral scoring, client success teams, and a data-driven approach to partnerships. What does that look like? Like, what is the infrastructure that allows you to have that 100% client retention?
Yeah, and it's gone above that since in terms of value.
Because you're growing the accounts now year after year.
Yeah, exactly. So there's two things you touched upon both. So first of it's internal structure. I think we spent a bit of time talking about client success in the older interview there because it was a bit of a alien term to some degree in media businesses at the time. So what are they doing? What are they selling? What's the revenue per head on that? Which would be the sort of traditional metric in a events or media business. But whereas in sort of SaaS, and appreciate SaaS businesses are under a different type of pressure right now, which maybe we can come onto in the AI world. But for SaaS businesses, that was ordinary. Because what SaaS businesses understood at the time that maybe media operators didn't, I think they're much closer to it today, is that actually if you're driving retention and you have that independent, almost consultant-like relationship with your CS team, you're going to make your platform or your solution much stickier. It's going to be more deeply embedded. You've got much less chance of churn. You're spotting things earlier. Let's go back to your example earlier. Oh, that video interview you guys didn't work. If you've got a CS team there, they know that within 2 days of publishing. So you can deal with that challenge before it becomes detrimental to that partner's ROI. And you can have a really honest, transparent conversation with your customer about it. So it's also about having, you on the sales enablement platform side, you're talking to marketeers. They understand these things. So you treat them like the mature, well-trained marketeers that they are, and you have that conversation. So internal structure is important. Every single client gets allocated a customer success manager, every single one. Different SLA depending on the sort of tier and the spend, of course. But without fail, they get allocated one. And a dedicated account manager with an integrated go-to-market. Again, customer-centric in that approach. And then on the reporting side, I think, honestly, probably still the case. Media reporting in general is enormously poor. Maybe I won't make many friends saying that, but I don't think that's particularly contrarian to say. And we've worked really hard there. We've got a data engineering team internally, 4 staff strong. We've got a data analyst team, 4 staff strong. And we open up our data lake in the platform so clients can see what's really going on. And that level of transparency, again, maybe I'm being contrarian, interesting to get your thoughts on it. That level of transparency is quite unprecedented because the traditional, particularly some of the legacy operators, and they do brilliant things, don't get me wrong, but the thought of opening up to a client at an individual editorial level, how many people are viewing that? At an individual webinar level, how many registrations you got? At an individual event level, how many people went to your session? How many people went to your lunch? That's a scary thing. You have to have confidence in your underlying data. So again, I'm very lucky that I inherited a brand where that was possible. But that level of transparency is key, particularly now. Look, and in 2026, it's different again. Let's look at B2C, because it's always that little bit ahead of B2B, right? If you're running a campaign now and you book an influencer, let's say, you can be pretty confident in the outcome because you're paying them based on a number of likes or whatever vanity metric it may be. But moreover, the sales impact you can see in 48 hours of running a campaign with one of these influencers.
Yeah.
How many more T-shirts have I sold or whatever it may be? And B2B lags well behind that. Now, I appreciate it's more complex. The deal cycles are longer. The average number of individuals involved in a deal, I think, is up to something like 12. So you've got to touch more individuals over a longer, more sustained period of time. But if you're not opening up and architecting your data in a way where you can show that to your customer, you're going to be behind.
So one of the things ever since launching AMO, I've always been frustrated with is publishers who will blame Google or Facebook for stealing their advertising business. They'll say they stole the business from us. They stole our audience. There's this real victim mentality. But then you look at those ad platforms, right? Like I'm running Facebook ads trying to, very targeted growth for AMO. I can log in and I can see the exact number of people who clicked on the ads. I can log in and see the performance, what's working, what's not working. Same thing with Google. I don't use Google right now, but you can do the same thing there. There is a real-time platform that gives me real-time insights. And I can then make decisions based off of that. Oh, that campaign's working. Let me spend more against that. But then with buying a traditional advertisement or sponsorship through a publisher, you sort of sign the insertion order and then just close your eyes and wait to see what happens. Yeah. And that's just not going to work. And so I have started to see more B2B publishers starting to actually create their own platforms where you as a marketer can log in and see in real time how the campaign is performing. Okay, so here's the webinar that you've got coming up. Here are who all the registrants are. Here's an article that was, a thought leadership article. We're not going to give you the PII, right? We're not going to give you their email address or their name, but we'll tell you that they're the director of X at this company. So you know who is starting to consume your content And then customer success or account management, which I want to come back to in a second, can call up that client and go, hey, by the way, we've noticed there's this cohort reading this thought leadership article. We didn't account for that. Do you want to go after them? And we can build you a whole separate kind of campaign there. This reporting becomes an upsell opportunity.
Absolutely right.
So I think actually you're right. More publishers are going to have to get comfortable kind of opening up the data box, right? Here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. Here's how things are playing out. They have to get comfortable with it. And the reality is the publishers who aren't comfortable with it probably don't have the strongest product to make available to their clients.
Yeah.
So you've described this concept of customer success and then account management. Two different kind of roles that in my mind, when I hear that, I think the same thing. So break that apart. What is CS versus what is account management?
Sure. God, that's a podcast in itself, isn't it? On very dangerous, sensitive water here. We see CS as the delivery support.
Okay.
Right. So, and again, this is because, exactly as you just described, it's so outcome based. So it's one thing to lay out the campaign, but we've got to make sure that metrics are being hit, that the client's happy with those metrics, that there's some sort of throughput into pipeline. So they almost become advisor-like.
Kind of like project managers a little bit?
Almost, yeah. But also media experts.
Yeah.
So if we can see that actually this article's gone not quite how we wanted it to go, like what's going on with the ICP? Like what is that? What's the first party data telling us and how do we respond to that? And actually how should you utilize that learning in other campaigns? So that's part of it. Also leaning into the cross-platform distribution that you talked about. So we own the audience. We don't necessarily own the platforms. I think you have to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to one of our sort of pillars of growth is distribute like a creator. And what we mean by that is, okay, goes up on datacenterdynamics.com or SDxCentral.com. What's your LinkedIn play? What's your Facebook play? Mm-hmm. What's your Instagram play? How are we giving our clients content for all of those channels, whether that's social shorts or write-ups following conversation, whatever that may be. And your CS manager will be architecting this. It's like, here's your social, here's this, here's what this means. It's one thing to have the real-time platform that needs translating into actionable insight. And the CS team play a really key role there for us. What's the intelligence behind that data? And the media specialists, so they really advise. And for example, we've leaned into AI in our platform now. So we look at both an aggregated company level and an individual first party level, how consumption patterns are changing. So let's say in your normal week, you're in a research role, maybe reading 4 white papers and watching a couple of DCD broadcasts. It's normal for you. You're an engineer. You need to know what's going on with cooling technology, power technology, whatever that may be. But then we can see a sudden spike in that behavior. You're suddenly consuming twice as much. We will compare 12 weeks of your consumption activity with a rolling 3-week period. And we'll give you a rocket score if you're searching in that 3-week period. And so the CS team are also there to notify the partners. It's like, hey, look, these individuals are now rocket scoring. The recommended sales action is X. Or have you put them into list nurture flow in your own CRM instead of this like steady state one? They need to be in an accelerated nurture. So it's one thing to have the platform. It's one thing to have the data. It's another to be able to get to actionable insight from the data. And we see CS as a key part of that. Conversely, account managers are there to do the upsell piece that you referenced. It's like, okay, this campaign's gone brilliantly well. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Or to your earlier point, we've done a brilliant bit of demand gen with maybe a demand gen specialist. Hey, this campaign's gone super well, but what's the consistent brand drumbeat? Come on, go and have that conversation. So they need to work hand in glove, of course. That's always the plenty of conferences talking about account management and CS working together in tandem. And of course, that collaboration is key. And they have to join calls together so they each understand what's going on. But ultimately, that's how I delineate responsibility in that sort of Venn diagram.
And so then there's also a salesperson, though, right?
It's the account manager.
Oh, so the account manager is sales. Yeah. Okay, so it's sales and okay.
But our account managers are really on the retention and upside. we have a separate new business team for sort of net new business.
So if I'm a new client, I talk to your new business team, but once I've signed with you, I then get an account manager and they're my person going forward.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this will be a sort of contentious sales science discussion, right? But typically speaking, we see individuals who are very, very good at hunting new business, having those conversations. They love having them. They enjoy having lots of conversations. They don't necessarily want to be having the conversation or doing that account mapping piece. Okay, so we've got this demand gen campaign. Who's the brand person? Or we've got an event, quite a transactional event sale a lot of the time. Someone's testing out a show and they're doing a small booth or they're doing a small thought leadership activation. The account manager is say, booth buyer, booth procurement. Who should I speak to about turning this into something more substantive? What's the brand headache? What's the demand gen headache? It's a different type of sale, ultimately. And with exceptions, of course, I would venture to suggest that salespeople are either good at one or the other.
Is compensation dependent on which side you're on? Like, does the hunter, the new business person, get paid more than an account management person, or is it not really how it works?
That depends on experience.
Okay.
Finding talent in the new business team is very difficult nowadays. Everyone thinks they want to do this slightly more strategic side of it. Let's say, I don't like the term. It's a bit loaded in itself. And so you can't have base salaries sort of markedly out for either team. It's a very different skill set, should be rewarded differently, but you will have different commission structures. We pay a flat commission structure on the new business team, and the account managers are rewarded a little bit differently. So that's where you'll see the biggest difference is how we reward certain behaviors.
On that podcast, you said that a lot of B2B sales and marketing teams are fundamentally still disjointed, largely running a 2013 to 2018 playbook. Now, this podcast was a few years ago.
Sounds like something I'd say.
Sounds like something you would say, right? So this podcast is a few years old now. So do you still believe that's true in 2026, or do you think that the industry has finally caught up with the right way to sell?
I've got to say, I still think that's by and large true with exceptions. And the exceptions are the businesses who are doing really well right now. I think it's very, very difficult. I mean, you're talking about the pain point is, again, if you come back to the outcomes, customer thinking, how do we get more individuals into pipeline and how do we sell more? And therefore, if your structure is, we're going to set this team up and we're going to have a different sales team for every single event and a different sales team for media, how are you really creating the best possible campaign for those clients? Look, I understand it. A lot of these businesses are big legacy businesses. There's been a lot of M&A. Of course, there's operational, structural problems. But again, this is where I can speak fortunately because I haven't inherited that necessarily. Right. And so an integrated go-to-market makes complete sense. I think it's easier for the client. They've got that trusted touch point within our business. And ultimately, it's better for all of those retention metrics you talked about. I think there's greater cognizance of seeing events as lighthouse moments within a rider campaign. Particularly in an AI world, I think the importance of those first-party signals and the importance of an integrated campaign structure is being seen more and more in most media businesses. So actually, if we can't be at the heart of the community we're serving, our life's going to be that much harder. I think there's for sure a cognizance there, and that actually you have to move towards that real-time reporting, and you have to almost be an extension of that sales and marketing team. I think there's lots of businesses doing really exciting things there. I saw some, and I won't say who because it's in launch, but they'd built out MCP. Mm-hmm. So they had, within an LLM, you could put your natural language query in and it would surface the data within the LLM. That's a brilliant bit of forward thinking. So don't get me wrong, there's media businesses doing exceptional things right now. But I think legacy structures are still making it difficult, particularly on the data. You can't surface buyer propensity. You can't surface natural language queries unless your data architecture is correct.
Correct.
And the thing that I think a lot of media businesses are still struggling with, either because they can't quite justify the investment, or I still hear a lot, and it's absolutely baffling, we're not good on tech. It's like, guys, this is not a technology challenge.
No.
This is about fundamentally understanding your audience and getting your data architecture correct. And there is still, to my mind, businesses that are not investing the necessary time or resource into ensuring that's the case.
Yeah, they'll say they're not good at tech, but then they'll build a custom CMS. They'll build, custom email service providers, but yeah, no, they're not good at tech.
Or they'll spend 20 million on AI, kind of a nebulous term. It's like, cool, how's your data layer? Oh yeah, a bit messy. It's like, well,
yeah,
it's not joined up, is it? It's not going to work. If your data layer is not as good as it possibly can be, and look, with all the declared intent that event businesses have to deal with, and even media operators, right? You get a newsletter subscription, and there's a lot of erroneous data in there. So this is not a one and done. This is an ongoing, iterative, difficult process. But if you're not thinking about your data architecture, again, you're going to end up really behind the curve.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the events business. So obviously when George started the business, he would go into these events, see what the events were, and he's like, you know what? Like every deranged founder goes, you know what? We can do better. So he decides he's going to launch his own network of events, and years later he's doing 100 events a year, which I do one event a year, and the thought of doing 100 of them gives me absolute agita. Like that is 2 events a week. That is a terrifying proposition. But you guys were doing events in New York, Sao Paulo, Singapore, Cancun, all over the world. Talk about what is the event structure for the DCD shows? Like, are they small conferences? Are they larger shows? Like, talk a little bit about what those events look like.
Yeah, it's changed a lot since those early days, which would have been largely geo-adapt and Vol. We actually did we took the opportunity that the pandemic betrothed us with to really think about how we create events that are, again, more based around customer outcomes. And so we went through all of our post-event surveys and where are we getting the highest NPS, and actually what is it that people appreciate about the DCD model at the time. And there was so much in that qualitative feedback, which was like, hey, your events are the best, guys, because I'll be stopping mid-morning to have a coffee and a cookie or whatever it may be, and I'll bump into the exact person I needed to meet. There were moments of serendipity because George built out such a strong network, senior level audience. Those moments of serendipity were sort of huge drivers of ROI, but they're largely unstructured or accidental.
Right.
And so one of the reasons we came back with the Connect brand, deliberately titled, was how do we make those moments of serendipity, bumping into the right person at a stand or at the coffee barista or whatever it may be, how do we make that really deliberate? And again, we thought about deliberately curating those buy and sell exchanges. And that may have been as simple as doing some one-to-one meeting programming. The Yotta brand does a Yotta Connect program, which is brilliant. Marilyn, who looks after that for us, does an exceptional job because that is not an easy thing to curate. But even on the DCD Connect brand still, we do a lot of lunch briefings, a lot of workshop briefings, VIP dinners, simple things, wine tastings, things that people want to attend. Because if you think about the customer again, this is post-pandemic, they may be missing those water cooler moments. Yeah. How do you make it more experiential? And I'll refrain from saying festivalization because I think it's been a bit butchered for whatever reason.
Cannes is a festival. Cannes is a festival, but a lot of people say that they're like weirdly slightly more elevated trade show in a convention center is. No, it's not.
The term's very loaded. But what that means for us is how are we deliberately curating meaningful buy-sell exchanges. And that's not necessarily on the show floor. That might be on the paddle tournament in the morning or the drinks reception in the evening or private dinner. Those moments which are harder to program, harder to replicate, depend on intent data, depend on declared intent. That's what's driving the ROI. That's what's driving the outcomes. And that was a big part of how we went back to market with Connect. In terms of the Connect series now, it's about 25,000 attendees a year. So each of those individual locations is pretty seriously scaled.
So how many total events is it in the Connect portfolio?
Oh, God, you're putting me, I didn't do my homework. 9.
9, so 25. I mean, you're talking about...
Let me go through the calendar. We've got New York, Dubai, Bali, Madrid, Cancun, London, Virginia, Sao Paulo, and then awards. Oh, and India. We've launched India this year. So it's 9 plus an awards.
All right, so you're talking about close to 3,000 people per event.
Yeah, particularly on the mature ones.
Yeah.
The launches take a while longer to get there. But yeah, it's typically 3,000 and up on Connect. They're flagship regional markets. They're 2 days, and they're loaded with those experiential, curated buy-sell exchanges. Yotta is, I think I mentioned Rebecca, who leads that division for us, was formerly at Shop Talk. So you've got this hugely experiential brand vehicle of an event. I think that's going to be 7,000 people in Vegas this year. So that's the sort of most scaled, if you like. And the more ambitious, that's a vision. So DCD Connect is design, build, operate, invest as the persona base. And we're starting to bring co-located events into that. We've got the Accelerated Compute Show. We've got the Investment Forum to serve for those specific personas. Yotta is deliberately intended to be more silo busting, if you like. George, again, at the heart of it, really sees this generational moment we're in digital infrastructure as being the sort of jet engine moment equivalency. So he'll talk about how when the jet engine was first created, you couldn't just land that into the airports at the time. The airport designers had to fundamentally redesign the landing strips, and the air traffic controllers needed to fundamentally rethink about. And so you've got all of these interdependent disciplines. And we're seeing the same thing in digital infrastructure right now, the energy adjacency, the compute adjacency. These are fundamentally interdependent now, and InfraXMedia is that connective tissue. And so Yotta is much more deliberately, let's bring these tribes together and let's deliberately cross-pollinate. And then you've got Data Center Nation, maybe slightly smaller scale, although Milan, their biggest event, is maybe 2,000, so it's maybe up to 2,000. But I don't think the volume is necessarily the determining factor. They go into emerging data center nations with maybe different regulatory requirements or different sovereign data laws, and they provide, as the name infers really, data center nation, the dedicated meeting point for that nation. So between those brands, we think we've got 3 hugely complementary brand vehicles there. But more importantly, to come back to the platform lens that I would typically take, 3 really complementary engagement vehicles and data vehicles. What are people attending? How are those attendance patterns different? Who's got the highest buyer propensity? Everyone attending any of our events where, say, hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler alert for the attendees, they wear a little beacon on their badge and we track them around the venue. Not so we can see who's eating the most chicken at lunchtime, but so we can really start to drill down into that behavior.
Yeah, you see which booths they're going to, which sessions they're attending. You can program based around that. Use that data post event. Yeah, I mean that's just good data collection. With regard to the Connect shows, from a revenue perspective, like from a percent perspective, how would you break down attendee revenue or delegate revenue, as you would call it here, versus sponsor, exhibit, that side of revenue? Like, where would you look at those two?
Yeah, relatively small. That's not to say there's not a huge runway on the delegate side, but Connect has a very specific model, whereby the buy side, if you like, to borrow from a slightly clunky media term, attend for free. Only the sell side is paid. So we're about 70 to 80% delegate revenue on that portfolio. 70 to 80% sponsorship revenue on that portfolio. DCN is broadly the same. Yotta, because of its cross-disciplinary approach, it's more 50-50. And obviously it's a newer event, so it takes a while to normalise. But for the most part, it's sponsorship-centric.
So Yotta is now only 2 years old, right?
It'll be the third edition this September.
Yeah. Held in Vegas, huge show, different than how you normally do things. Why create an entirely separate brand? I don't even know what Yotta stands for, right? Why create a totally separate brand versus building this as part of DCD, building on that brand, calling it the DCD show or something like that? Why build something totally separate?
Yeah, great question. And there was some internal debate about this at the time for obvious reasons. I think firstly it was because of the market we were serving. So it was an external customer reason. this was broader. It was about that cross-pollination of energy and compute and data centers, obviously at the heart of it still. But when you go to market as data center dynamics, attracting those energy and compute personas is maybe perhaps more difficult as a leading edge. Mm-hmm. Now the DCD is obviously moving to target those adjacencies as well, but as a leading edge for that, perhaps more difficult. Yotta, by the way, reflects the Yotta by age of data that we're now in. So it's a measure of that. And so even in the title of that event, you've got a little bit of the direction that we're trying to drive in. We're at the Yotta by age. We're in the AI age, and actually that requires the great energy thinkers and the great compute thinkers and the great data center thinkers to come together so that the go-to-market, the vision behind it, and again, I'll give George a shout-out for driving this. He's a visionary in this space. And so it needed that different vehicle to set out deliberately to achieve that outcome, part one. And part two is the DCD team were running enormously fast on the core portfolio. You're talking about 40% CAGR revenue growth. And that would have just been too much of a distraction.
Right.
Knowing that we wanted to do this sort of huge and in a way very American, very heavily investing in the operations experience. Who's done that best in media and events over the past decade? You're probably looking at Shop Talk and Money 2020 and those types of events where you really got heavy investment in that vehicle. And we wanted to replicate that and give back that sort of style event in the industry and hire the people to do that and who had experience. I mentioned Rebecca Salzner earlier. Danny King has worked on events of that scale for Informa. So it's a team out in New York, not to be particularly at launch those first couple of years, too distracted with the very, very heavy platform play in the core. We can let them run an event. We can let them, again, begrudgingly use the term festivalize it, and really deliver something powerful back to the community. And I'll give credit to Mr. Kimball as well, our chairman, who was very clear from the outset that that was the best way to do it. And it takes a lot of investment to build a team like that. And Opus were happy to support it, and it's worked out brilliantly.
So you're expecting 7,000 attendees this year?
Yes.
Which is, for a third-year show, pretty incredible growth. You said it's about 50-50 delegate and sponsor exhibitor revenue. So I tried to do a little bit of napkin math in my head while you were talking. I landed on roughly $13 million in revenue for that show.
USD, probably.
USD. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, you might be at the punchy end, but without putting too much pressure on the team, it'll be there or thereabouts.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Where do you see that show going? Like, how much bigger do you think that show can be over the next couple of years?
Again, you alluded to it earlier, the tailwinds are extraordinary here, right? So you could do that with a data center show in its own right. And in fact, events we've got in New York and London are pretty close to those sorts of numbers in terms of attendees. Mm-hmm. And in compute, you see even bigger TAM potentially than the one in data centers. You look at events like GTC, you could double it again on the attendee side and still not be anywhere near high penetration of target audience. So there's huge runway in developing that event. And obviously that takes a lot of different things, from the pure logistics of doing that all the way through to making sure you've got sort of curated deep dives for each of those ICPs. There's a skill to that. But huge runway. And then the other, once you've got the sort of brand equity that Yotta's having a bit of a zeitgeist moment, you can start looking at geo adaptions as well. So
take that show to somewhere in Europe, maybe somewhere in Asia.
I think so. Again, not to put too much pressure on Rebecca and her team, but I think they've built something they should be very proud of. I certainly am.
Yeah.
And so there's, of course, there's runway to geo adapt and further scale.
Is Yotta a wholly owned subsidiary of Infra? Okay. So we've kind of talked about the whole media and events portion of the business. Talk to me a little bit more about the Academy. What is the product that they're buying? Is it just like self-guided coursework? Is it like instructor-led coursework? What's the business model? Like, how much is somebody paying to get access to this? Like, help me understand that whole world, because it's an interesting business model.
Yeah, that varies a bit. So there's some instructor-led courses, which may be delivered online, but with an expert facilitator. There's some in-house, so if you've got certain cohorts that want sort of facility-specific training. And there's a lot of on-demand, sort of self-paced. For the learner, for the individual learner, what we're trying to do is obviously personalize that learning experience to what they need. So at the heart of the platform is our diagnostics engine. So a learner will come in and we'll take some diagnostics, and they give us a knowledge score that we get from that, but also a confidence score. How long they might have taken to answer a question, how confident they were with that response. They rank that on a sliding bar. And so we can then come up with recommendations and personalise that learning experience. What that also gives us on the L&D side is huge amounts of data that we can then use for either forecasting in our market intelligence business or for product development on our academy business. So it becomes, again, a sort of self-compounding circle. And we will recommend learning. So we've got different learning programs for whether you're an electrical engineer, whereby you're going to need lots of things about data center power and data center design architecture, or whether you're a mechanical engineer and it's the future of cooling, and we've got liquid cooling modules now and the plumbing of that. Or indeed, so it depends about the persona you're serving. We might have BDs using the platform. We've got an introductory course called The Business of Data Centers, which is very much for those teams on the vendor side and those individuals who actually just need a fundamental understanding of the industry to have better customer conversations. So, and I think every year we're adding to the amount of content we have. I think we added something like 90 hours of learning last year.
Wow.
So we've invested in-house in a solutions engineering team and a content team to be able to develop content at the pace alongside the industry. So that's been very important to engender that sort of scale. But it's moved from being, pre-pandemic, expert facilitator, 12 people in a classroom, a bit like this, PowerPoints, into something much more personalised and much more suited to the needs of that individual learner. And if you think about it as an L&D leader, a lot of your staff are they're engineers, they're in facility. You want to pay them to be in your facility and making sure that your facility is working. So if you're taking them out of the facility and putting them into a 4-day training course, you're still paying for them, but you're almost paying twice because you still need the individual in the facility. And so we've had to be cognizant of that and start building training programs around those sorts of mission critical schedules. So increasingly self-paced, where they can go in, they can consume a module, they can do 1 or 2 bits. The L&D expert can see that in real time. And it's not taking them out of the facility for the whole day. That's increasingly popular. I think not just as an L&D trend, but in a mission critical environment, certainly the case. And so we've gone from, I'll borrow from your delegate sponsorship question earlier, we've gone from, if you like, quite a delegate heavy approach to L&D 6 years ago to quite a corporate learning solution response to L&D now. And the revenues are following that pattern. So I think 22% of our revenue now is multi-year, because in a mission critical environment, the operators need that continuous professional development. And that's really what we're fixing for now with that product.
And so when you kind of build out a package for one of these corporates, are you looking at their company size to help determine how much the contract's going to be? Is it like you pay $30,000 and your company gets all access to it? Or is it, you only need these 2 types of courses, so we're going to charge you X? Like, how do you price accordingly?
Yeah, it's more difficult, and the deal cycle's that little bit longer. So if you're an individual, you can literally go online and you can buy a certification. Right. It's e-commerce enabled, and they range from like $1,200 to $4.5 USD. I mean, this time it's difficult. But yeah, if you're looking at an enterprise solution, you might be putting through 2,000-3,000 engineers. Right. So the AOVs at that point are markedly different from the individual one. And if you're in a multi-year contract, it's going to be 7 figures. So it really does depend on what we're fixing for.
So that's the closest thing you've got to like a subscription product almost.
For now, yeah.
Well, the next question is, on your website, you do have this coming soon intelligence product. I know you said that's launching in Q4, so like most CEOs, you might want to hold it close to the chest, but talk to me a little bit about what you see this product being.
Yeah, you're right. It'll be pure play information services subscriptions from day dot, which is obviously attractive to value creation. And we've seen media and events businesses do that very well over the past few years with intelligence. Charlie and his team did a brilliant job in taking what was fundamentally an events and media vehicle and turning it into an information services proposition. So there's plenty of great examples out there. So obviously from a value creation perspective, it's compelling. But why are we fundamentally doing it? It comes back to that jet engine moment. The need for holistic, robust information in this industry has never been greater. And so how can we as a business fix for that pain point? Well, in two ways. Firstly, again, very lucky, we're sat on a huge proprietary data moat. We're picking up 3 million behavioral transactions every single month. We're training 8,000 engineers every single year. That gives you a huge amount of proprietary data. And I'll give you a very real example in a slightly geeky data center context.
I would expect nothing less.
There was talk of a wave of liquid cooling going back to when I first started in 2018, and you had huge sort of CAGR projections from the IDCs of the world and some others, Omdias, looking at our learner data and the knowledge gaps there. So nobody actually knows how to design for liquid cooling right now. So there's going to be a deployment lag. Well, actually, without access to that proprietary data set, you wouldn't have seen that. And so the projections were ahead of where the game was.
Which means investors could be making some pretty expensive decisions based off of a skills gap that they don't know exists.
Yeah, or just going a little bit early.
Yeah.
And actually, even now, you've got a lot of hybrid operating scenarios with a combination of cooling. I think probably will have for some time. So that's an example of what our proprietary data can tell us. And as we've scaled, the behavioural data and the trend data behind that's getting stronger and stronger. But coincided with that, what doesn't really exist in the digital infrastructure space right now is a really strong contributory data model. And we've now got 10 founding partners providing us with anonymised in the platform sales and unit data to make sure that we've got the most robust forecasting available.
So when you say that, you mean a vendor who is selling to a customer is passing back how much they're selling into your platform.
Correct.
Why would they do that?
We give them lifetime discounts to the platform. So it's very much a
marketing discounts.
A give-to-get model. No, so they'll have 50% off a subscription. So all founding partners get access to the whole intelligence platform enormously cost-effectively. But we want to anonymise their data. That's one. So one reason is they're giving us something. They want to get something out of it, of course. But by doing that, they're also getting much better forecasts because if they know that their 6 or 7 competitors are also doing the same, what are they going to get from us? A much more robust forecasting model. And so there's a very, very big industry pain point alongside, obviously, the financial reward for doing so. And it takes time. You know, we've been developing this product for 2 years. So we're very excited. And again, I've been fortunate to have a board who have supported that investment decision. We've now got an MD in place called Emily Neal, who's previously at IWSR and Global Data and is hugely experienced in building habit-forming product. And we're going to market with a team that she's building. And, of course, it's going to have – let's talk about AI for a minute. So we think we're really well differentiated because of our unique first-party data, because of that contributory data. But also AI has made creating publicly available data that much easier. And so incumbent providers who might be over-relying on information that's publicly available anyway, we think we can be somewhat disruptive there and actually aggregate that information, combine it with our proprietary data, combine it with our contributory data in really interesting ways. And we're super excited about that. And you touched upon the tailwinds. As the capital flowing into the industry increases, you've got to have robust tools there to support that decision making, and we think we've got a real right to win with our history in the space.
And who do you think the primary customer of that is? Is it capital allocators? Is it the actual data center operators? Like, who do you think the primary
Yeah, a bit of a combination of ICPs.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got the sort of large institutional investors looking at what operators they may want to support or where to site new projects. So one of the bits of functionality is a big construction map with a facility layer, which is kind of table stakes in our industry, and a sort of energy layer behind that with some energy forecasting and some cost forecasting. So it's undoubtedly one persona. You're absolutely right. The operators may be in the platform for the same reason. Either they're sort of site selection individuals looking at that map and trying to map out what the next hottest market is and how well connected is it and what's the cost of energy and actually how available are the renewables, because everyone's looking at sustainability goals now. And then on the other side, you might have product managers or innovation leaders really looking at the more technology centric side of the platform. So let's go back to the cooling example. What type of liquid cooling has got most momentum here? It's a single phase, 3-phase, direct to chip. What should I be putting into my facility? Where should I be looking at M&A? What should I be getting my product teams to look at? So that's another big persona. And then finally, you've got the marketeers and the BDs themselves. So it's the amount of first-party trend data in there really going to help some of that sales decision-making. So we're going to market in a very simple way, single subscription price, all you can eat from the platform. It's AI-enabled, so we've got natural language processing in there, which is trained and learning on the DCD archive. As you mentioned, it's a 25-year archive. So again, fiendish to compete with if you're a new kid on the block. And it's going to be MCP enabled. So we invested time and resource into it, and we're pretty excited about that direction.
What will a seat cost?
It's $10,000 USD per seat.
Okay.
So less than $1,000 a month for each individual.
We're talking about, 9-figure investments in this industry. $10,000 is not going to break the bank.
Yeah.
But right now, the way you're not making any money on that business yet.
No.
All right. So right now you make money 3 ways: events, marketing services, and education.
Correct.
Learning. 55 million pounds. If you had to break that down, across those 3 units of marketing, events, and learning across that 55 million, kind of what's the pie chart look like?
Yeah, we see revenue in terms of platforms. So it's mostly sat in the sales enablement platform, 45 plus probably in the sales enablement platform.
Which is primarily marketing and events.
Yeah.
Media and events,
and then 7 to 8 in the L&D.
Okay. And is the business profitable?
Yes, very much so.
What are your margins roughly?
About 30%.
Oh, so it's a healthy business too.
Yeah. At the net level, yeah.
Yeah. And when you roll out this the data intelligence business, where do you see that kind of growing over the first few years? Like, what have you budgeted? Where do you if you and I sit down in 2028, 2029 and do another episode, you say you're going to tell me intelligence is X revenue.
Yeah, look, conservatively, I'd be disappointed if we hadn't built that up to circa 10 million of ARR. That's obviously ARR is different to what a P&L looks like. But there's lots of examples of good competitors in the market achieving more than that. So if we get the proposition right, we think it's going to be a huge value creator for us and a big ARR driver, which again, it's attractive for all the right reasons. We're talking about building highly habituated, deeply embedded into workflow products and information services. It's a great use case of a business that can move us very quickly into that direction.
All right, so I want to talk about a couple of the deals you've done over. First is you talked about it a little bit, is Data Center Nation. Bought that in 2024, a little bit more of like an emerging market nation kind of play. Why buy this rather than trying to build yourself? It's kind of the classic build buy kind of conversation.
Yes, yeah.
What did you see from a buy perspective that made it worth that theoretically pretty lumpy investment versus building it out through the data center kind of Connect portfolio?
Yeah, a few key things. Firstly, brilliant team. So to some degree, you're always with this investing in people. And they had some great, well-connected, highly charismatic figures leading that business and continue to lead that business. So that's one reason. The second one is speed. So we are, particularly at DCD, the sort of flagship or the established brand, I should say, if you like, enormously platform-centric. I am building those platform vehicles to drive scale, to deeply embed that data and to move us towards ARR. And so the agility that it takes to launch a lot of national events becomes difficult within a very platform-heavy structure,
right.
or more difficult. Not impossible, more difficult, because we've trained the team to think about, what's this like in the platform? What's the data layer tell us? And how do we get this plugged in? And how do we integrate? And all of that good stuff. And it's hugely value-enhancing for all the reasons we talked about. Maybe it's a little bit obstructive to trying to launch 2 net new events every single year, where you need just a more agile, sales-led, sales-heavy go-to-market motion. The DCN team had a brilliant go-to-market sales motion, a huge amount of agility. And we believe by plugging that into our data set and giving them access to an integrated tech stack to support those launches, it's much easier to do 2 launches a year if you've got opt-in records to go to market through. And so we thought by plugging it in, the operational leverage that would give them, the opt-in data strength that would give them, would engender quicker revenue growth than they were experiencing at the time. And we knew the founder, Davide. George knew him well. He worked at DCD for a period, went in market and worked with Schneider and all sorts of different data center businesses. So between the talent and the agility and the data integration that we felt we could leverage, it was an absolute no-brainer for us to bring that in.
And so when you integrate that business, are they a separate team, or is it all now part of one team?
Separate team, but integrated data and tech stack.
What about sales? Is sales also separate?
Yeah.
Okay. Why keep those separate? If you have a buyer for data center and why keep?
Yeah, good question. Again, just understanding the ICP. So data center dynamic, because of the platform approach, we're typically selling into central marketing and sales teams, whether they're global or at least regional. And they have those global and regional pain points, and that requires a sophistication in terms of looking at those outcomes and those examples you played out for me earlier in terms of, well, actually, what's the demand gen headache and what does that need to look like in 6 months? Data Center Nation are operating in national markets. They're pitching their marketeer in Italy who only cares about Italy,
right? Okay.
And doesn't necessarily need a 12-month view of what that looks like. She's trying to engender leads tomorrow in Italy. So you've got a very, very different ICP. Again, it's about understanding that customer. And therein makes complete sense to give her the tailored information that she needs. And it enables us to retain that speed as well. Deal cycles are quicker. The pitch is easier, and we can move a bit faster.
In April 2025, you bought SDxCentral, which covers networking, AI, cybersecurity, cloud, which in some respects is a broader IT infrastructure than just data centers. Why make this acquisition? And is this sort of the first step towards your business becoming more than just data centers?
Yeah, well, probably the second step in truth. I think Yotta was the leading edge of that. But SDx certainly supports that ramp up. What's the name? It was software-defined everything. So it was seeing digital infrastructure through a computer network lens. Obviously, at DCD, we see digital infrastructure through a data center lens. And as the IT and OT converges, we talk about the jet engine moment of being chip to grid. That became a really attractive publication for us to, A, help Yotta and accelerated compute as part of Connect scale that bit faster, but also, B, make sure we were covering that expanding ICP. And what we saw was a brand with some great content, with some inordinately brilliant readers. The readership was really strong, particularly in the IT director, in the IT decision-making ecosystem. The rack level decision-making that maybe DCD didn't cover so much. So there was a great Venn diagram of readership, and also a brand that just needed a bit of love and a bit of investment and really refocusing on what makes publishing brands successful in the first place, which is trust and engagement and, frankly, human editors. And we saw a real opportunity there to give back to that community by investing heavily in human editorial. We've had a fantastic 12 months with it.
So you've now been CEO for a little over 3 years.
Yeah, 4 years. Yeah,
4 years.
Jan 22.
Oh, Jan 22. Okay, so 4 years now. So inevitably, as CEO, I'm sure you've made decisions that were wrong. We all make decisions that are wrong. What is the bet that you made that just wasn't right?
There's been plenty. I think you can. I'm sometimes guilty about. It always comes back to people, doesn't it? You can do a lot of intelligent platform manipulation. You can do a lot of intelligent things with data and with events, and really understand that go to market. The things you get wrong are typically people related, particularly as a more inexperienced CEO. We've probably been slow to onboard new talent. I'll say that we've gone from 100 to 200, but particularly new talent in leadership positions. That's partly why Yotta's worked so well, because we did that from the beginning. We brought in a COO in January of 25. That's had a huge impact. Wish we did it 12 months earlier. We just brought in a new CFO who's hugely experienced in SaaS environments. So again, we've now got a financial team, and the incumbent team are brilliant, but we've now got a team who are really thinking about business partnering and modelling. And that's a new skill set that we're benefiting from. And also, when you look at operating models, we've gone from a business that was largely regionally managed. We had an office here and an office there, and we had a regional MD and a regional MD. And the transition to a platform operating structure is difficult, and we haven't always got that right. We've sometimes expected too much of our regional offices, not supported them to the degree that we should have, and they've done an incredible job for us, particularly our Madrid office, which looks after Madrid and Cancun and Brazil, and they've been indispensable to our growth, 30% plus CAGR. So reinvesting into those teams is necessary and important. Sometimes we've been a little bit slow to do that.
What should we expect from the business over the next few years? Obviously, we know the intelligence thing is coming, but is there anything else that we should expect to see?
Yeah, I want us to continue to push the envelope on all three of our platforms. So we've got a market intelligence one launching, but actually our sales enablement platform is sales intelligence, in the same way that a Bombora or a Tech Target or a Sixth Sense is. And so there's a huge runway to really scale monetization there. And look at that model. We've already got metrics supporting it a bit SaaS-like in terms of the NRR, the GRR, the behavior, the lifetime value. And so that's a really exciting continuing expansion plan. And same thing with the Academy, you touched upon it. We're already at 22% multi-year. So I expect to continue to take us forward in a way befitting of a subscription and tech business rather than maybe what you would typically do as an event business. It's all about the underlying community for us and pushing that forward.
Is there more M&A planned for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll always be looking, and we'd be foolish not to. It's a generational moment in digital infrastructure. We're a market leader. I think almost by any measure you want to look at: traffic, audience, data, revenue, and I want to stay market leading. And you're able to do some of that organically. So we're doing 40% year-on-year organic right now. But obviously, it's a honeypot. There's a lot of bees around the honeypot. And if M&A can help accelerate us on that journey, particularly into the new spaces, the information services and the media, then we'll absolutely be looking at it.
When you underwrite these deals, these acquisitions, are you basing it purely on the company's financials, or are you also basing it on kind of what you can bring to the table and you unlock? You have hundreds of thousands of audience records that you go, wait a second, if I can just get that audience in front of that product, we're going to blow this out.
Yeah, much more the latter. Yeah, and in fact, SDx was, not doing huge numbers. It's much more about the approach that we've taken to the underlying data architecture. We've got a great model now. We've instrumented cross platforms in ways that are quite unique. So whether we're bringing in media assets or event assets or information services assets, we believe that there'll be a compound effect by getting them into our tech stack, by getting them into our sort of unified data signals. They'll scale much faster with us than without us, and that's what we're predominantly banking on.
So you've referred to Opus as family PE or PE family. It's sort of like a family office. But it's also
family office, yeah.
What is their mandate for you? Are they looking at this like a traditional PE hold where, in the next few years they're going to put you out to market? Or is this like they want you to scale this thing as big as humanly possible, and they're going to hold it for the long term. Like, what's your mandate as CEO for this business?
No, look, they're trying to operate it like it, and that's why I refer to it more as family office. But they're really trying to look at it as a PE vehicle, and they've made other investments as well. It's not, they're not InfraXMedia. It's not the only investment they made. And as I mentioned, Simon's very experienced in this area.
Yeah,
they know it really well. So at some point in the future, I'm sure they'll be looking to realise that value. But in the meantime, for me, I think it's a super exciting time. We've got a huge amount of runway. The market intelligence product is pre-launched, so there's certainly a huge amount to exploit before that happens, I would suggest.
So I want to end with the same two questions I ask every operator that comes on the show.
Okay.
First, for a media operator kind of trying to figure out where they should place their bets right now, what's the one thing you would encourage them to focus on?
That's a great question. I think you have to really lean into AI and data. And I know you're here to attend some conferences this week, and I've attended a few recently where they've been very AI centric. That's the topic of the day, I suppose. It's almost inevitable. And I still see probably too many conversations in terms of it's taking site traffic. I need to lock down my site. I don't want anyone getting into it. It feels to me the wrong approach to that. I think we have to lean into these trends. And again, really instrument like a platform. Ultimately, publishers need to stop thinking about their website as a castle and everyone must come to the castle. There's lots of ways to attract audience. You own the audience. You don't necessarily own the platform. That's okay. So you have to instrument your site. Of course you do. But how are you instrumenting LinkedIn? How are you instrumenting TikTok? How are you instrumenting whatever that channel is? Ultimately, you really must be wherever buyers are browsing. That's your job as a content provider, fundamentally. You must be where the buyers are browsing. And I think people should lean into that. Businesses should lean into that. The other thing we say is be the source, not the summary. People forget AI can only source it's only a summary of what already exists. So if you are the source of that information through your analysts or your journalists or through really believing in the quality of content, and I know that's a slightly old cliched stick, then you will build the brand equity. And ultimately at a time where traffic is a challenge for a lot of publishers, your brand equity and your trust is the product. That is the product. And you can then think about how you then productize that trust. But you have to continue to be the source. And that's been a really key operational pillar for us.
And my second question, my last question is, what is something in your life right now that you are absolutely obsessed with? It could be personal, professional, but it's something you are obsessed with right now.
Professionally, it's creating your habit-forming product. There's some great, not necessarily new publications on this, but Hooked by Nir Eyal was very good on this. And actually it plays to the AI theme, actually, to come to that. It's actually, if you're creating product that are indispensable for daily workflow, the consumption mechanism doesn't matter. Whether it's on your website, on LinkedIn, through an MCP, in an LLM. How do you create truly habit-forming products? So professionally, I'm obsessed with that. Personally, I'm kept very busy by two young kids. I've got a six-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old lad who take up most of the weekends. So again, just trying to manage that, and my poor wife who deals with all of that when I'm trying to build a media business over here. So personally, we're obsessed with raising two hopefully well-balanced children.
Are any of us ever truly well-balanced?
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast.
That's a whole different podcast. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Right. Appreciate it.